It was still dark in Charlotte when Clara Bryant arrived at the Collins Tower. The city's skyline rose up in the fading shadow of night, and even the wind seemed to whisper through the empty streets, brushing softly against glass and steel. It was 4:30 a.m., the hour when most dreams still lingered, and the only lights in the lobby flickered from security panels and vending machines. Clara 73 leaned into the cool, silent rhythm of her morning. She walked with measured steps, one hand gripping the handle of her battered mop bucket, the other guiding a cleaning cart she'd used for over a decade. Her uniform, a gentle gray jacket with the name Clara stitched above the pocket, carried faint traces of bleach and lavender. She always wore her late husband's old watch on her wrist, the ticking hands a small comfort that made each minute feel real. As she moved through the lobby, the echo of her footsteps danced off polished floors and marble pillars. The only person to greet her was Marcus Green, the building's overnight security guard. Marcus, still in his early 20s, sat at the desk with his sleeves rolled up and a thermos of coffee cradled between his hands. "Morning, Ms. Clara." He called, his voice, gentle, eyes kind, behind thick-rimmed glasses. Clara managed a warm smile. "Morning, Marcus. You look half asleep." He grinned, offering her a fresh cup of tea. "Chamomile. It's good for your back." For a moment, the building didn't feel quite so cold. Her routine never changed. She always started on the top floor of the 30th, where the city's most prestigious law firm kept offices walled with glass lit with cold blue LEDs. There were always crumbs on the mahogany conference table and coffee rings circling expensive reports. Clara set to work in silence, her hands steady, her mind tracing memories as she wiped away the day's careless marks. She knew where every hidden stain lay, every creak in the floorboards, every draft that snuck through the windows at dawn. Down below, Charlotte's city lights brightened, and traffic started to pulse through the streets. As the clock inched toward 7:30, the building's heart began to beat faster. Elevators chimed, doors hissed open. Men in pressed suits and women with sharp heels poured onto the floors, voices brisk and urgent. Clara kept to the edges, shrinking into corners so as not to block anyone's path. She moved around the rush, invisible, a ghost in soft-soled shoes. Sometimes the attorneys and analysts barely noticed her. Sometimes she caught the stray glances of irritation. "Could you get this done faster, ma'am?" someone would say, not looking up from their phone. There were moments that stung. The cleaning closet was tucked behind the service elevator, and Clara would sometimes hear snatches of conversation when staff thought she was out of earshot. "Why don't they schedule her later? She's always in the way." The words pressed into her chest, quiet and heavy. But Clara had learned not to carry bitterness. She knew this building better than anyone. Its rhythms, its secrets, the names of the workers who made it stand each morning. She had always believed in the dignity of honest work, and she held on to that belief even when no one else seemed to notice. Once, many years ago, she and her husband Samuel had watched the Collins Tower go up floor by floor, brick by brick. He'd been the night janitor then, and sometimes she'd bring him dinner, and they'd sit on a crate in the basement listening to the hum of the generators. Samuel was gone now, but the building still felt like a piece of home, its heartbeat, its faded corners. The quiet moments when only the janitors and the night guards were left behind. She wore his watch every day, a small anchor that kept his memory close. This morning, as Clara finished scrubbing the marble tiles in the executive hallway, she paused at the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the city. The sun was rising, gentle golden coloring the glass with a new kind of hope. For a brief second, Clara allowed herself to dream that she was seen, that her name might be spoken with respect. But as the phone started ringing and laughter echoed from the conference rooms, reality returned. She packed up her supplies and moved on unhurried. On the way down, she passed Marcus again. He was straightening his tie, ready to end his shift. "Thank you for the tea, Marcus," she said softly. He looked up, sincerity in his voice. "Thank you for being here every day, Ms. Clara. Most people don't notice, but I do." Clara nodded, heart heavy and grateful all at once. The day stretched ahead, filled with work and small indignities, but also with moments of quiet pride. A cleaned window, a polished banister, the secret knowledge that she was part of the building's story even if nobody else cared to remember. As the sun climbed higher over Charlotte, the Collins Tower hummed with life, and Clara Bryant continued her silent rounds. She was the keeper of quiet halls, the soul beneath the surface, unseen but never absent. And though the world rarely looked her way, Clara never stopped seeing the world. As the morning wore on and the building filled with ambition, Clara could sense a change, an uneasy feeling that today something would challenge even her quiet resilience. By midday, the hush of dawn in Collins Tower had vanished, replaced by the bright electric churn of business. The marble floors gleamed under harsh overhead lights, voices bounced off the glass walls, and the entire 30th floor was abuzz with anticipation. Word had spread today was the big day. Wilton and Finch, the law firm occupying the top floor, was set to host a lavish unveiling and open house for clients and investors, complete with sparkling cider, polished brass nameplates, and the promise of recognition from the city's business elite. The event had been planned for weeks, every detail overseen by Janice Holt, the firm's operations director. For Clara Bryant, it was just another shift. She'd cleaned the conference rooms twice, already wiped the fingerprints from every glass door, and double-checked the restrooms. But as she quietly polished the foyer's silver railing, a familiar anxiety crept up her spine. Events like this always meant she had to work faster, quieter, and most of all, become invisible. Janice was notorious for her perfectionism and her impatience. Clara had seen it all before: the rushed rehearsals, the frantic calls, the sharp glances cast at anyone who didn't fit the picture-perfect image. "Clara, I need you out of sight by 2, Janice had said that morning, barely glancing up from her tablet. "No smudges, no distractions, please. We want the place to look premium." Clara had nodded, her words caught behind her teeth. She knew the routine. She was expected to vanish, just another shadow swept out of the frame, so the building could glow for the people who truly mattered. She finished up her rounds, her hands steady, even as her mind drifted elsewhere. Sometimes when she scrubbed away the coffee stains and candy wrappers, she wondered how many lives she'd quietly cleaned up after, without anyone knowing her name. The clock ticked past 1. The building's energy was electric: florists delivering arrangements, caterers arranging silver platters in the break room, staff in crisp suits rehearsing greetings in front of the mirrored walls. Clara moved through it all, her presence ignored by most. A few nodded curtly as she passed, but no one met her gaze. She heard her own footsteps echo in the corridor, felt the static prickle in the air as the big hour drew near. Then in the corridor outside the executive suite, she heard the unmistakable click of heels and the brisk, clipped tone of Janice's voice. "No, I want the chairs from the 16th floor. Those are too worn. And please make sure there's no cleaning staff lingering when the guests start to arrive." Understood. Janice's phone pressed to her ear. Her gaze swept the hallway and landed squarely on Clara, who was polishing the elevator buttons. "You're still here?" Janice asked, arching an eyebrow as she ended the call. Clara straightened, cloth in hand. "Yes, ma'am. I just have the west corridor left." Janice's lips tightened into a thin, impatient line. "No, I need you to leave now. We can't have someone in uniform roaming around during the reception. Please pack up and go. I'll call you back when we're finished." Clara hesitated. In all her years, she'd never been dismissed before her work was done. "I just need to finish the floors so no one slips." Janice cut her off with a raised hand, her tone sharp and public. "I said now, Clara, please. We can't have you cluttering the view." Several staff members turned to watch. Clara felt their stares, a flush of humiliation spreading across her cheeks. The moment lingered, heavy and awkward. Downstairs, Marcus watched the security monitors. He saw Clara's shoulders sag, saw her quietly gather her things. He clenched his jaw, fingers tightening around a paper cup until it buckled. But there was nothing he could do. The pecking order was well understood. And so Clara packed up her cart in silence, not rushing, not protesting, moving with the same steady calm she'd always carried. Janice watched her leave, offering a thin smile and a whisper just loud enough for others to hear. "At least she knows when to disappear." The elevator ride to the basement felt long. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, the familiar ache of old grief returning. She knew what it meant to be dismissed, not just from a room, but from dignity itself. The building she'd cared for all these years had no place for her in its proudest moments. Yet Clara didn't go straight home. Instead, she turned left at the bottom of the elevator shaft and walked to the back of the service corridor. There, in a dim corner, lined with dusty pipes and old holiday decorations, she unlocked her narrow metal locker. From inside, she withdrew a thin envelope, its edges worn and creased. The handwriting on the outside in careful blue ink read, For Clara Collins Tower, shareholder reserved rights. She held it in her lap for a long time, her thoughts drifting back to Samuel, her late husband, who'd always told her, "There's more to a building than glass and steel, Clara. It's the people that make it stand." Tears prickled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She ran her thumb along the envelope's seal, feeling the old stubborn pulse of hope that had kept her coming back all these years. Upstairs, the party began. Laughter and music floated down through the vents, muffled and far away. On social media, the event hashtag trended photos of beaming executives and gleaming floors filling the firm's timeline. Not a single mention of the woman who'd made those floors shine. Not a single nod to the invisible. In the darkness of the basement, Clara let out a slow, measured breath. The envelope in her hands was more than a keepsake. It was a quiet promise, a symbol that her presence, though dismissed, could never truly be erased. As the celebration raged above, Clara lingered in the quiet below her future, and the future of the tower shifting with the simple act of holding on. The air in Collins Tower felt tense on Monday morning, the kind of tension that sinks into the walls and settles behind every locked door. A warm June sun glared off the tower's glass exterior, lighting the downtown skyline with a summer brilliance. But inside the lobby was hushed, its marble floors echoing with anticipation rather than footsteps. The weekend's event had faded into memory, but something new was in the air, a rumor of change of decisions made elsewhere that would soon fall like summer rain. By 9:45 a.m., the tower's main entrance was transformed. A small crowd of Wilton and Finch's senior staff and building management had gathered by the revolving doors, eyes flicking between their watches and the concierge's computer. Janice Holt stood at the front, her hands folded tight around a leather portfolio. She wore her sharpest blazer and her brightest smile masking nerves with precision. Every inch of the lobby gleamed down to the arrangement of lilies on the reception desk. "Have you heard who it is?" whispered one associate voice low. "They say it's the new principal owner. Full authority." "No one knows much," another replied. A black sedan rolled quietly to the curb, its windows opaque as obsidian. The driver's stoic uniform opened the rear door with a measured sweep. A pair of stiletto heels touched the stone. Clara Bryant stepped out, but she was not the janitor anyone remembered. Today she wore a tailored charcoal suit, the lines crisp against her slender frame. Her hair, silver and fine, was swept into a smooth bun. Around her wrist, as always, was Samuel's old watch, gleaming softly in the sun. For a moment, no one spoke. Janice's jaw slackened as she recognized the familiar face, but something was different. There was a gravity in Clara's step, a quiet strength that seemed to part the crowd before her. Clara nodded to the receptionist, who, stunned, could only manage a whisper. "Good morning, Miss Bryant." She offered a gentle smile, her eyes catching Marcus's behind the security desk. He straightened, pride and astonishment mingling on his face. For years he'd watched Clara enter the building before dawn. Now as she walked through the lobby in quiet command, he could only nod in silent respect. The elevator doors closed behind her, and Janice, who trailed with the nervous energy of someone who senses a storm. The ascent was silent, except for the hum of the gears. When they reached the 30th floor, senior partners and staff stood in wait. A hush rippled through the hallway. Clara paused, surveying the faces before her. She didn't rush. She walked to the center of the open space, her shoes clicking softly against the marble. Janice forced a smile, extending her hand. "Ms. Bryant," Clara's gaze was steady, unflinching. "You asked me to leave this floor last week, Ms. Holt," she said, voice calm but clear. "You said my presence cluttered the view." Murmurs stirred. A board member stepped forward, hesitance plain. "Allow me to introduce." "There's no need," Clara said gently, her voice cutting through the room like sunlight through clouds. She placed the envelope, Samuel's envelope, on the conference table and slid it forward. "My husband, Samuel Bryant, and I have held shares in Collins Tower for more than 4 decades. His passing left the decision to me. As of this morning, I have finalized the acquisition of a controlling interest. I am now the principal owner of this building." The silence was absolute, but Clara was not done. She turned to Janice, who paled, clutching her portfolio as if it could shield her. "You manage this building with efficiency, Ms. Holt, but not with respect for the people who make it stand. That ends now. Wilton and Finch's lease will not be renewed. You have 48 hours to vacate your offices. Janice opened her mouth, but no words came. Clara continued, her voice softer but unwavering. You see, the value of a place isn't in the view from the window or the name on the door. It's in the hands that polish the rails, in the voices that greet each other by name. This building is not just glass and contracts, it is people. And from this day on, every person here will be seen. Across the hall, Marcus's eyes shone. He tried to catch Clara's attention, pride welling up in his chest. Clara nodded to him, then addressed the room. Marcus Green, please come forward. Marcus, startled but resolute, approached. Clara smiled, gentle as always. I've requested that Marcus be promoted to security manager. He's the first to greet every soul who enters these doors and the last to make sure everyone gets home safe. That's leadership, whether it's on a business card or not. A ripple of surprise moved through the staff. Clara pressed her hand to Samuel's watch. I am not here to punish. I am here to honor. I ask only this: remember that the quietest hands have always kept this building strong. From now on, greet the ones who sweep the floors as you would greet the ones who sign the checks. The meeting ended without applause, but with a hush that lingered like a promise. The power dynamic of Collins Tower shifted, the old order quietly replaced by something warmer, harder to measure, but infinitely more human. As Clara stepped into the hallway, she felt no triumph, only a gentle relief. She did not look back. Marcus followed a few steps behind, awed and grateful. Outside, the city shimmered in the noonday sun. Inside, Clara had restored something more important than pride. She had restored the simple act of being seen. And as the voices faded and the sun climbed higher, the heart of Collins Tower began to change, beat by quiet beat. 2 weeks after that fateful morning, the lobby of Collins Tower was transformed. Sunlight poured in through the high glass atrium, splashing gold on the polished floors. Gone were the portraits of past executives and plaques boasting record profits. In their place stood a newly erected wall of honor, a long, clear pane of glass, its surface etched with dozens of names in gold, each one shining as the day turned. On this day, Clara Bryant stood quietly before the wall, her reflection mingling with the letters. She wore a simple navy coat, the same watch glinting on her wrist. She felt the hush of the lobby, not the tense silence of old, but a respectful pause, a collective breath held by everyone present. There were no velvet ropes, no cameras flashing. The only audience was the building's lifeblood custodians in fresh uniforms, kitchen staff with proud smiles, receptionists and drivers in pressed shirts, and Marcus Green, now in a crisp new suit, the name security manager embroidered just beneath his badge. One by one, the gathered staff found their own names. Some grinned, some wept softly, and a few just stood in wonder. The last name on the wall belonged to Samuel Bryant, Samuel L. Bryant, Night Custodian, 1977-2011. Clara reached out her fingers, trembling slightly as she traced the familiar letters. All at once, the old ache of loss and the new warmth of belonging filled her. She remembered the night Samuel would come home bone-tired, but always with a story about some kindness or small disaster that only the quiet workers would ever know. A soft voice spoke beside her. He'd be proud, Miss Clara. It was Marcus, standing respectfully, just out of her way. Clara smiled at him, a real smile full of memory and promise. He never wanted fame, she said, her voice steady. He just wanted folks to remember the hands that built this place. Marcus nodded, emotion thick in his throat. They will now. Reporters hovered in the background, hoping for a statement. One bolder than the rest approached with a notepad. Ms. Bryant, would you share a few words for the press? Clara shook her head gently. No, thank you. Then she looked up, her gaze sweeping the faces around her. If you want a story, talk to the woman who fixes the elevator when it's stuck. Talk to the night guard who checks every corner when the rest of the city is asleep. Their voices have always been here, even if no one was listening. As the small crowd lingered, people began to share their own stories, quiet thank yous, memories of hard days and unexpected laughter. The atmosphere was lighter somehow, as if a burden had been set down and dignity finally restored. Marcus watched as new traditions began to take root. The staff greeted each other by name, and even the executives paused to share a word or a nod with the people who kept the building running. Later that afternoon, Marcus found Clara at the front entrance, ready to head home. He opened the door for her and smiled. Where to now, Miss Clara? She adjusted her coat and gave a little laugh. Home. I think I'll have some ginger tea and rest these old bones. Marcus grinned. You'll still visit, won't you? Clara nodded. As long as there are names on that wall and hearts to remember them, I'll be around. Maybe not every day, but enough. The sky outside Collins Tower was clear and bright, and the city hummed with the promise of another day. As Clara stepped out, she felt no need for grand farewells or spotlights. The glass doors swung shut behind her, reflecting the golden light, the new wall of honor, and the future she had helped shape, a future where no one would walk these halls unseen. And so the legacy of kindness and respect took root in Collins Tower, carried quietly in every greeting, every handshake, every name spoken aloud. Some buildings stand because of their foundations, others because of the people who finally learned to see each other.